It seems the lack of further education and psychological preparation have played their part in the problems of some of England's players. The highest profile of these sufferers have been Paul Merson, Tony Adams, and the infamous Paul Gascoigne. Merson admitted to drink, drugs and gambling problems that forced him to go into rehabilitation.
I'm an alcoholic.
Adams admitted to drink problems that saw him going to prison for drink driving.
I've been attending AA, and obviously it's anonymous, and it's okay. I'm on the road to recovery.
And Gascoigne, a general sense of excess living unbefitting a professional footballer that saw him eventually drop from the World Cup.
You know, in the England squad, you could be away for 68 weeks, and I don't think in 68 weeks we'd be able to have a kebab, so I thought I'd try it on the last one before we met up with the squad.
Paul Gascoigne couldn't cope with that. He found living in a goldfish bowl, like George Best, was intolerable, and it drove him to drink. I don't think that's going to happen with David Beckham. I don't think he's particularly a drinker, but I think alcohol abuse is by far the worst aspect of the problems in football.
When you look at that squad of England players, you could imagine them being gathered together for some kind of sort of enormous sort of therapy session for their various addictions and personal failings and catastrophes. Why is it that English football seems to be producing so many of these? Well, I do think it's a sort of bigger question about English blokes, actually. You know, there is a great tradition of English manhood for overdoing it a bit, really, not being terribly grown up.
This appears to be a largely British problem, as on the continent, in countries like Holland, and in particular a club like Ajax, the system is different. This is because formal schooling is continued by young players at the same time as teaching them the skills of the game. They are also given mental preparation for the future. They sign for their clubs as early as 8 years old, and their success rate is such that 8 of their current first-team squad have been at the club since they were children.
The kids have to train 4 or 5 times a week, and sometimes when they come from outside Amsterdam, they miss some classes at school. When they come here, they start training first, then they have dinner, and then there are teachers running around here, so the subjects they miss at school, they can get taught in over here at Ajax.
I think the main difference, clearly, has been getting to the young players at a good age, at an early age. It's a long process, you know, from 8 to 18 is a 10-year education, isn't it? And over that 10 years, obviously, the players were educated fully from a footballing point of view and from a behavioural point of view and from a grown-up point of view. So it seemed to me to work and work very well, and they were a little bit ahead of us, I would think.
One Ajax star who found the system difficult in England is Danny, viewed as Beckham's equivalent in Holland.
In England, I was 18 at the time, and I got a big pressure from the press, and I didn't get a lot of help. It was quite the opposite. I mean, when I was in West Ham, I saw a lot of players having a beer after the game. Even I had a beer after the game sometimes with them. The alcohol will only delay your reintegration, your physical reintegration. If the next day is not on the training or he's tired or something, then I should point a finger to him when I see him drinking a beer. Here, what they do is first try to build as men, and then put that together with football and make the person.
Another man who has experienced the English system is former Manchester United and Ajax midfielder Arnold Muren. Now coaching kids in Holland, he has a negative view of the English system.
You know, English players got a lot of spare time. When you 1 or 2 or 3 days off and you don't play football, you're looking for other things. And I'm not saying you can go to a pub and drink for an hour, because that's the English style of living. But you mustn't do it too often, I think. In Holland, we are saying to players, don't go to discos, don't go to pubs. Well, if you want to go out for a drink, no problem, but do it at the right time.
At Manchester United, the 16-year-old Beckham had no education or psychological training. He was too busy honing his ball skills. In 1992, he played in the Manchester United youth side that swept everything before them, and 8 players from that team went on to achieve first-team status.
It was a terrific time, that, in my career. Even though we were only youth players and very few of us had played in the first team, it was nice to be part of a side that has gone on to do so well. But it was also nice to be part of a side back then that, you know, we were just such a good set of lads. Even though David Beckham's an out-and-out Cockney, he's been a mad keen red. I remember opening the pages of one paper one morning and seeing that he was plastered across the centre of it, being, you know, the next wonder kid. But I mean, I knew him and I knew what potential he had at that time.
After 2 years being nurtured in the youth team at Manchester United, he finally made his entrance onto the main stage with great effect, scoring his first goal against Galatasaray of Turkey in the European Cup.
2-0! Beckham the youngster.
His progress was sudden, and after being a bit player when United won the Championship in 1994, he was a first-team member by the age of 20 when they won the league and cup double, beating Liverpool at Wembley in 1996. His meteoric rise was complete when at 21 he became one of the youngest England internationals, but still there were elements of the boy about him.
He arrived at the training ground at Bisham Abbey when he was first selected with an autograph book, taking little notes of all the players' names.
David Beckham was living the dream of every young boy.
It's like his story is such a romantic story. The real David Beckham actually does personify that dream, that timeless dream of football, if you like. So although he's modern, he's also part of the great romantic tradition of football. And he's handsome, he's talented, he does outlandish things. And of course he's going out with that girl, isn't he? He's got absolutely everything that's required. It's a full house.
That girl was Posh Spice, Victoria Adams. David could not have chosen a higher profile girlfriend even if he tried.
They actually met after a Man U game. Posh Spice was there with her sister, Louise, and she'd said that she'd fancied him and wanted to meet him, so they went to the Players' Lounge afterwards, and it was obviously a meeting of minds. I think they're both from, I mean, just despite her nickname as Posh Spice, she's not posh. They're both from quite sort of, I don't know, what would be called like nouveau riche backgrounds, sort of like, you know, new money. I think it'd be very difficult for him to go out with, you know, a local girl that worked in a supermarket or a secretary, because she wouldn't understand the pressures that he's under.
Everywhere you go, you get noticed, you know. If people don't know me, they know Victoria. If people don't know Victoria, they know me. So it's just difficult everywhere we go. You know, we don't get a moment's peace anywhere, apart from in our own home. And then there's photographers outside, which is really difficult at times. But, you know, we get each other through that.
I think Posh and Beckham are a good match, actually. I think they complement each other well. I think their characters, they're not, even though they might seem extrovert, I don't think they really are. I think they're actually quite, probably quite shy inside, and the look is a front just to say, oh, this is how I'd like to be.
Him and Victoria are planning to get married, they're expecting a baby. It's what normal couples do. What's the problem? The problem is that David's successful at what he does and Victoria is successful at what she does. But even then, that shouldn't be a problem. Whose problem is it? It's not their problem.
Beckham had become a newspaper editor's dream. He was as much a feature on the front pages of the papers as the sports sections, with his love of designer labels and flash cars.
If football is part of this media creation called Cool Britannia, then he is Mr. Cool Britannia where football is concerned.
He was no longer just a footballer. He had become a media icon. With his every move now under scrutiny, he began to feel uncomfortable with the media hysteria.
It's quite hard to understand because, you know, I was on the front page for wearing something that was obviously well documented, but and then I turned to page 5 or 6 and there was the train crash, which amazes me, to be honest.
I worry about all the media and all the press and all that are hounding them and chasing them. I mean, it's not needed really, because at the end of the day, he's a professional. And being in the limelight like he is, he does handle a certain amount. But obviously we're always there to try and, you know, take a bit off of him.
We can't start weeping buckets of tears for well-paid young football stars. But if we want them to develop as human beings and as really great players for the national team. We've got to do far more to nurture them, because, you know, becoming a good footballer isn't just about coaching. It isn't just about, you know, using your natural talent and getting out there. It's about a lot of other things. It is about lifestyle.
At the same time as the increase in media pressure, David Beckham's manager, Alex Ferguson, was attempting to protect him from the press.
I think it's an unrealistic view, generally speaking, although it might suit him at Manchester United, to closet these young players away and think that's the right course of action. There's got to come a time when they've got to deal with the media and they've got to deal with the outside world, the realities of life. And perhaps maybe if David Beckham had been exposed to that earlier on and become hardened to it even at an earlier age, the time he got to the World Cup, perhaps those flaws might have been eradicated from his game.
Beckham went to the World Cup as an integral part of Glenn Hoddle's England squad, having played in every qualifying match. But when they arrived in France, it was somewhat of a shock when Hoddle decided to omit Beckham from the first game, and found himself having to explain to the media that he felt Beckham was mentally unprepared.
I've had him in my side for many games. He's not yet to get on the score sheet, which has been a bit disappointing, and I just felt his focus hasn't been there over the, just the games leading into the World Cup.
He'd had a dip in form at the end of the season, and he seemed less able to cope with it. It might have been the pressures of his private life as well, building up his relationship with Victoria Adams, of course, makes him so high profile, not just as a footballer, but as a celebrity. So Glenn Hoddle had spotted the fact that his form had dipped. He described it as not being focused.
The reasons that Glenn gave were reasons that as a professional I would have to take on board, because Glenn knew the situation that David was in and his frame of mind that he was in, and I think that's the reason why he didn't play him in the first game. I think if you was to ask everybody outside of the England camp, would you have picked David, would have all have said yes.
I always have a worry when the coach becomes bigger than the team. If somebody at the top of the tree thinks that you're not okay, how are you going to feel?
To make matters worse, having been dropped from the first game against Tunisia, Beckham was bizarrely required to face the media single-handedly.
You know, you can never really get over something like that because, you know, I'm the sort of person that always wants to play in every game, and if I'm not, then, you know, no one can really do anything about it.
That should never have happened. You know, you could see that he was really stressful. I mean, he was under stress then and pressure, and he wanted to be in that first game. He wasn't in the first game. Then he had this interview, and you could tell by the tone in his voice, the look on his face, I don't think he even really wanted that interview. I think there was pressure put on him that he did not need.
I was present at that press conference, and it was interesting when it finished. He turned around and made a comment towards one journalist who was sitting there, and he said to him, I don't know why in the last few days you've been making personal remarks about me, as if you know me. You don't know me, I've never spoken to you before, and yet you're writing as if you know me intimately. And I think he wanted to get a few things off his chest.
Due to an injury to Paul Ince, he reclaimed his place against Romania as a substitute.
Will be asked to be a little bit more disciplined maybe than normal. And I think it's his lack of discipline maybe that has meant that has cost him his place, because it can't be anything else.
And then in the subsequent match against Colombia, scored one of the goals of the tournament.
Beckham strikes. Ah, save! Oh, there's one for the picture book. David Beckham, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant free kick. Unstoppable.
It was a magical goal. And in that sort of atmosphere and environment and the ambience of the whole World Cup, to keep your composure and your cool at a time like that was full credit to him.
Well, he scores some special goals. He always will. That's one great thing about him. When he's on the pitch, he'll always produce something a little bit special.
David was a hero after that goal. The country had the England lineup they'd been scrimming for, the player they felt was going to lead them to the World Cup final.